Hello, friends. Today I have a truly shocking and disgraceful story to share, particularly involving a Christian nun. The event that unfolded left everyone stunned, especially when she revealed that she was a Christian. She felt a deep sense of shame, but the situation became even worse when a lady priest, dressed in the familiar black and white uniform, was caught dancing and drinking with the crowd at a club. In the midst of the partying, surrounded by people intoxicated by both drink and music, the lady priest was arrested along with the others and thrown into jail. However, what happened the following morning will leave you speechless. A shocking revelation took place, one that completely opened the eyes of everyone involved. It was a discovery that would change everything. You won't believe the truth that came to light after this incident. Stay with us till the end of the video as we uncover a key fact that will deeply affect your perspective. If you're a Muslim, this story will undoubtedly strengthen your faith. This isn't just a random story. It's a story of betrayal, surprise, and the unmasking of a hidden truth. It makes you question how appearances can often be deceptive. How a person, seemingly so pure, could have such a hidden side. This story takes us into a world of secrets, faith, and redemption. What we will reveal today will be an eye-opener. Get ready for a tale that will hold you captive till the very end. This is the full story, told through the words of the lady priest herself, whose name was Lamia. She was sitting in jail, sobbing uncontrollably, as the female constables nearby berated her. One of them even tried to rip the uniform off her, saying, "You are a stain on Christianity. Do all Christians act like this? Were you at the club to disrespect your faith?" Lamia, trembling with fear and confusion, tried to explain herself, but no one seemed to believe her. She desperately wanted to convince them that she had no intention of dishonoring her faith, but they were unmoved. The constables continued to humiliate her, mocking her beliefs and situation. Despite her attempts to justify herself, the situation only worsened. As the tears streamed down her face, Lamia turned to a police officer and began to recount everything that had led her to this point. She told him about the priest who had led her into the church, about her own desires to help others, and how the priest had betrayed her. She explained how she had ended up in the club that night and how she had found herself trapped. But the officer didn't believe her story either. His skepticism only deepened her sense of despair. No one was willing to listen. In the midst of her misery, Lamia couldn't help but wonder, how could she ever get out of this situation? "My name is Lamia. My father was a laborer, working hard just to provide us with enough food for each day. I had dreams like other girls, but they never came true. As time passed, my parents passed away, and with their death, the responsibility of taking care of my younger siblings and my sick mother fell on my shoulders. I had no formal education because my father never sent me to school. I could only read the Bible, and that was all I knew. My father always wanted me to become a lady priest, so when he passed away, I started working at a church. There, I wasn't just teaching the Bible to the people who came. I was also teaching children. In addition to that, I did the cleaning around the church. It was hard work, but I did it because it was my duty. The little I earned helped me provide for my family. I knew that my life was difficult, but I didn't have a choice. My dreams of becoming something more remained unfulfilled. I had to stay strong for my family. As much as I longed for a different life, I didn't have the luxury of thinking about myself. It was my responsibility to care for my siblings and mother. Every day I would teach the Bible, clean the church, and do whatever was asked of me. That was my life, simple yet filled with sacrifice. The priest at the church, who was between the ages of 40 and 45, had always seemed like a kind man. He was the kind of person who made you feel safe, who spoke with warmth and generosity. His eyes had a certain gleam, a sort of tenderness that made me believe he was a good person. Over time, I thought he was looking out for me, like a father figure. I never questioned his intentions because he had always been kind to me, and I believed he genuinely cared for my well-being. However, I slowly began to notice things that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't until after a few months that I started picking up on subtle, unsettling behaviors. He would stand too close to me when I was working, his presence lingering longer than necessary. Sometimes, when I was cleaning or sweeping, he would come and start talking to me, touching my shoulder or patting my back in a manner that didn't seem entirely innocent. At first, I brushed it off as his way of showing care, but soon it started to feel wrong. His compliments felt like they had a hidden agenda, and his actions grew more frequent and deliberate. I began to feel confused about my feelings toward him. On one hand, he had been kind, but on the other hand, his behavior made me feel uncomfortable. His words and actions seemed to carry hidden meanings that I wasn't sure how to interpret. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to confront him. He was my superior at the church, a man of faith. The thought that someone like him could have any ill intentions seemed impossible. But deep down, I had a nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I began to question my own judgment. Was I being too sensitive, or was there something truly wrong with how he was treating me? One day, after finishing my chores and Bible lessons, he gave me extra money. It wasn't much, but it was more than what I had earned. I initially thought it was just his way of helping me out, of showing his appreciation for my hard work. But as time went on, I realized that this gesture wasn't entirely out of generosity. It was a way to make me feel obligated to him, to show me that he could give me what I wanted if I only followed his lead. I began to feel trapped. I wasn't sure what to make of his behavior, but I couldn't shake the feeling that his kindness was rooted in something much darker. It felt like a power dynamic, one where I was at his mercy. But I had no other choice. I couldn't afford to lose this job, especially when it was the only thing keeping my family afloat. Little did I know this so-called kindness would lead me down a path of deceit and manipulation that I was too naive to recognize at the time. It was one evening after finishing my work at the church when the priest called me to the back room. It wasn't unusual for him to ask me to help him with something, as he often had small tasks in the church that required assistance. But when I entered the back room that night, something felt different. The air was heavy, and I felt a sense of dread that I couldn't explain. I tried to push it aside, telling myself it was just my imagination running wild. As I stepped into the room, I saw him standing near the window. The room was dimly lit, and the silence between us was deafening. He looked at me with a strange intensity, and for a moment I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Before I could say anything, he spoke. His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, as he told me that he had been watching me for some time. He said that I was special, that I had a great future ahead of me if I only followed his advice. At first, I didn't understand where this conversation was headed, but then, in the blink of an eye, it all became clear. He began to speak of things that made me feel uncomfortable, things that went against everything I believed in. He said that if I truly wanted to achieve greatness, I needed to prove my loyalty to him. He spoke of sin and how it could be washed away, but in a way that made it seem like there was no consequence. He promised me wealth, success, and fame if I just followed him. His words were seductive, and I felt trapped. I wanted to run, to scream, but something inside me hesitated. I had always trusted this man, and now, in a moment of vulnerability, he was asking me to betray everything I stood for. I could feel his eyes on me, his gaze unnerving, and his words clouding my judgment. I was torn, my faith and values clashing with the temptation he offered. The priest's once kind demeanor now felt like a weapon, one that was slowly but surely breaking me down. In that moment, I realized just how much power he had over me. I had no idea how to escape this situation. He wasn't just the priest I had trusted. He was now the person holding the key to my downfall. His promises of a better life were nothing more than a ploy to manipulate me into giving up my morals, my beliefs, and my dignity. When he told me to follow his instructions, I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to leave, to run as far away from him as I could. I realized in that moment that I had to make a choice, to give in to his temptations, or to hold on to the faith and values I had fought so hard to maintain. With trembling hands and a racing heart, I refused his advances. I told him firmly, "No, I can't do this. I won't betray my beliefs for anything." His expression shifted instantly from one of calm persuasion to one of anger. I could see the frustration in his eyes as he took a step closer to me, trying to convince me to change my mind. But I stood my ground. "I will not give in to this," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. In that moment, everything changed. The priest, furious at my rejection, lunged at me. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced as I tried to get away from him. In the chaos, I managed to grab a nearby object, a necklace with a pendant I had worn for years. I swung it at him, hitting him in the face. Blood began to pour from his wound as he stumbled back, stunned by the force of the blow. With my heart pounding in my chest, I bolted from the room, my feet carrying me as fast as they could. I couldn't look back. I couldn't stay there any longer. I didn't care what he might do next. All that mattered was getting away. I ran out of the back room and into the streets, away from the church and away from the man who had once been a figure of trust and kindness. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in that place any longer. As I fled from the church, my mind was racing. I felt like I had escaped a nightmare. But the reality of what had just happened was too much to comprehend. My heart was pounding in my chest as I stumbled through the streets, not knowing where to go. I had nowhere to turn. Everything I had known was now shattered. I didn't know who I could trust anymore. But then, as I was walking aimlessly, I found myself back at the church. It wasn't that I wanted to return there, but I didn't know where else to go. I needed help, and I needed it fast. As I stepped inside, I saw a man sitting in a corner, someone I had seen occasionally at the church but never really interacted with. He was around 50 years old, with graying hair and a kind, weathered face. He was the only one there at that moment, and I felt a strange sense of relief when I saw him. I approached him, my voice trembling as I tried to explain what had happened. I was still in shock, my thoughts muddled with fear and confusion. "Uncle," I cried, "please help me. The priest, he tried to force me. He tried to make me sin. I don't know what to do. Please help me." The man looked at me with concern and compassion in his eyes. He listened to my story without interrupting, and I could see that he was genuinely moved by my words. After a long pause, he spoke gently. "Don't worry, my child. You're safe now. I'll help you." He told me not to worry and assured me that he would take me to the police station to report what had happened. His calm demeanor was a stark contrast to the storm of emotions inside me. I clung to him, desperate for guidance and relief. I felt like I had finally found someone I could trust. However, as we left the church and got into his car, I realized that something wasn't right. The direction we were heading wasn't toward the police station. My gut told me that I had made another mistake, but I couldn't bring myself to stop him. I didn't know who else to turn to, and I was afraid of what might happen if I didn't follow along. The man drove me to a club in the city. The moment I stepped inside, I felt as if I had entered another world entirely. The atmosphere was dark and unwelcoming, filled with loud music and smoke. The people inside, dressed in expensive clothes, barely noticed me as I was ushered in. It wasn't long before I realized the terrible truth. He had brought me here to sell me. The man had handed me over to a businessman who paid him thousands of dollars for me. My heart sank and fear gripped me. I was no longer in control of my life. I was now a commodity, something to be used and discarded. As soon as the exchange was made, the businessman took hold of me and pushed me toward the dance floor. "Dance," he ordered, his eyes cold and calculating. I felt sick to my stomach, but I had no choice. I moved mechanically, forced to entertain the crowd. Men approached me, making lewd comments and gestures, but I couldn't escape. I was surrounded by strangers, all indifferent to my suffering. I cried silently, hoping for someone to notice, but no one did. I was just a body, a mere object for their amusement. Then, one man offered me a drink. I didn't suspect anything at first, but as soon as I took a sip, everything went black. The world spun around me, and I felt myself losing consciousness. It was then that the police raided the club, bursting in with flashlights and shouts. They apprehended several people, including me, and I was dragged away. I had done nothing wrong, yet I was caught in the same trap as the others. The police officers didn't understand my situation, and I was thrown into a jail cell, confused and terrified. I had become a victim in a place where I had hoped to find refuge. When I was locked up in the cold, dark jail, I felt utterly alone. I tried to explain to the female constables and officers about my situation, hoping they would understand. I told them I was just a victim, but no one believed me. They mocked my story, assuming I had somehow been complicit in the events that led to my arrest. The harshness of their indifference left me feeling helpless, and I sank into despair. But then something unexpected happened. A young Muslim girl who had been in the jail for some time approached me. She saw the tears streaming down my face and sat beside me, offering a gentle smile. She asked what had happened, and I could no longer hold back. I told her everything: the betrayal by the priest, the deceitful man who had promised to help me, and how I had ended up in this terrible place. She listened carefully, her face showing understanding and compassion. After I finished telling her my story, she spoke softly, saying, "You've been led astray by people who don't care about you. There is one true path that leads to peace, and that is Islam." Her words caught my attention, and I listened intently as she spoke about the beauty of Islam, about its teachings of justice, kindness, and truth. She told me how Allah's mercy is boundless, and that Islam is a way of life that brings peace to the soul. She explained how, despite the hardships we face in life, we can always find hope and redemption through faith in Allah. She told me that it was not too late to find the right path, to embrace Islam and be free from the lies and deceit that had entangled me. Her words filled me with a sense of calm and relief, something I had never felt before. She spoke with such conviction that I couldn't help but believe her. The hours in the jail passed slowly, and I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The Muslim girl's words kept echoing in my mind, and a deep sense of peace settled in my heart. I knew I had to make a decision, and by the time the night passed, I had made up my mind. I embraced Islam, accepting the truth that the girl had shared with me. As I recited some verses from the Quran, a sense of calm washed over me, and I finally fell asleep. The next morning, I was woken up by a female constable who told me that my bail had been approved. I rubbed my eyes in disbelief. I was free to go. As I looked around the cell, however, I noticed that the Muslim girl who had been with me was no longer there. I asked the constable, "Where is the other girl? She was here with me last night." The constable laughed, brushing me off. "There was no other girl. You were the only one in the cell." I was taken aback. I remembered the girl so clearly, her comforting words and kind face, but now it seemed as if she had never existed. I couldn't understand what had happened. As I left the jail, I was no longer a nun. I had embraced Islam, and I felt a sense of peace I had never known before. But the mystery of the Muslim girl stayed with me. I asked the police officers about her again, but they just looked at me confused, saying there had been no girl in the cell with me. When they asked me for a description of her, I gave them the details, but their reactions only deepened my confusion. One officer mentioned a CCTV footage showing someone who matched her description. However, no one could explain who she truly was. In my heart, I knew the answer. Allah had sent her to guide me, to help me find my way. She had come into my life at the right moment, and through her guidance, I had found the truth. My faith in Islam had been solidified, and I knew that no matter what happened, I would never forget the help I had received.